Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll just give everyone a moment to dial in and get ready, coming from meetings and jumping on from other calls. But we'll be with you any minute now, and we'll get into the content. Hopefully, it'll be a valuable session, just talking you through how to build a data literacy and AI program, with AI being the new kid on the block that everyone wants to talk about, and how we're thinking about that space. So. Yeah, we'll just be ready to talk you through that in a minute or so, once we've given people time to get here.
You mean you don't have any hold music, Greg?
Sorry, yeah, letting the team down, aren't I? But we'll work it out. I can play some sort of tune with my mouth if you want. Where is that coming from?
That's the wonderful Sarah in the background, I'm sure.
Is it? Okay, cool. So everyone's had their minute now. We'll get into it. So my name is Greg Freeman. I'm the CEO of Data Literacy Academy. As you'll find out as we go through this conversation, we help large organizations to roll out data literacy and culture programs. And recently, we've begun to work through the AI literacy piece as well, ensuring that there's that not only level of data readiness, but also that level of AI readiness that the organization needs to be successful. And what we're going to talk you through today is how to build a data and AI literacy program, either internally or with a partner like us. Either way you want to do it, you should be looking to hit the same milestones, and that's what we're gonna walk you through today. I will hand over to my colleague Katy to tell you who she is.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm Katy Gooblar, Director of Education and Data, and I sit with the responsibility of looking at the education curriculum for what a data literacy program and AI literacy program should and does today, but also in the future, and also how we go about delivering that and taking on sort of principles of education and learning frameworks, the psychology of learning, and how we role model those behaviours. Thanks, Greg.
No worries.
Okay, so I'll open with the session outcomes for today. You've seen these online, as hopefully why you've joined. But the main reason really is to take you through, as Greg said, the steps of how you get started. So it's all about learning how to develop a data culture that drives decision making at every level in your organisation, how to discover practical approaches to incorporate AI literacy without overwhelming your teams and what that actually means. And we'll be sharing proven frameworks and best practice adopted by dozens of enterprise companies that we've worked with that you can tailor to fit your company's unique needs. Okay, so just to give you a bit of context here, McKinsey this year have said if 2023 was the year of the world discovered Gen AI, 2024 has been all about where we truly begin to use it. But the question starts with, is the workforce ready? And Gartner did a piece of work that said sort of earlier this year that said despite 25% of orgs intending to deploy AI and be sort of in that AI readiness space, less than 5% have actually been able to achieve it yet. And that sits in a couple of areas for us. And what we hear from working with big enterprise organizations is that marketing and sales use cases include things like support for strategies or personalization and lead generation. And they're all great things, and people are starting to understand how and why that adds value. However, adoption in areas of sort of an engagement have been really slow in the enabling functions and the back office functions, and those that are working in sort of the blue collar space. And this is yet where the largest proportion of the workforce actually sit, and where lots of the people you probably work with sitting within your organization. And there's so much value that could be added from those departments and functions that are working in ways that could be automated, could be more efficient, and could work from really benefiting from the AI and data literacy. And it's really brought a spotlight on capabilities and the opportunity to adopt new ways of working and really add value in those spaces. So we're just going to take you or ask you to join us on that quest, really, and think about in your organization, so your entire organization, just not the department that you sit within. We'd like to really know how ready are your employees to be that AI-enabled workforce of the future. So do us a favor, scan the QR code, put the code in on Menti, and give us some feedback. I'm tracking it live as you complete the question on there. Let's see how that comes in. Okay, and we do this regularly, so it's not just you that's participating to this at the moment. There's definitely others that are part of the contribution to this, and we can't wait to see what you say. Okay, just give you a little bit longer for the answers to come in. Okay, so they're moving about as we speak. Okay, so I'll just read them out for anybody who hasn't been able to connect so far and give you the data as it's coming in. So 17% have so far said, not ready at all. We don't know where to start. We've got 43% as open to explore use cases and really getting started on that journey. These numbers are changing as I'm speaking, so they are not going to add up to 100%. So 26% have said we're on it, we're proving concepts and it's going as we are. 11% of you have said we're adding value already and we're on track, and 5% have said we've got this. So kind of in line with what Gartner have said already there, but still we're looking at the high proportion of not ready at all, or we're open to explore but we're really early in the stage. Okay, Greg, over to you.
Okay, awesome. So what we like to do when we start these conversations, and the reason we're looking at things like AI adoption, is that as much as for a lot of organizations, they're being considered technology challenges, process optimization challenges, we fundamentally believe that everything in data has a human element and is a human problem at its root. So that's why we're talking about that stuff, and what we want to do is just set the scene about how we view data literacy. And if you've ever joined a webinar from us before, you'll have heard me say this, but we definitely don't mean to challenge the definition on the left hand side. Gartner released this definition a while ago, and if I read it out, I think you'll get a feel for why I'm saying what I'm saying after. So the ability to read, write, and communicate data in context, including an understanding of data sources and constructs, analytical methods and techniques applied, and the ability to describe the use case, application, and resulting value. That is, of course, what a highly data literate person can do, a data fluent person, if you'd call them that. For us, though, and what we see when we go into large organizations, so as large as BAE Systems, who are 90 to 100,000 people, your Bentley Motors, your SSEs, they're all large organizations with the same problem. And that is that they couldn't even dream of most people in the organization needing to even get to that level, let alone being there. What most organizations should be aiming for is a level of engagement, confidence, and value in data across the board. And therefore, when we talk about data literacy, we like to concentrate on what's on the right-hand side, which is a pyramid we've built ourselves. And in our mind, the Gartner definition probably starts at working with upwards, probably was written by a data person. If you ask a data professional what a data literate person looks like, they'll describe a data fluent person. That's not how we view it. We view it that actually, if we can get the confidence right in the individual, the mindset right about how they think about it, then we'll be on a journey to data literacy, and that will be really effective for the organization. So a lot of the barriers that organizations face in getting their people to use data, to trust it, are really in that confidence and mindset space. So let's not get too lost in what when we're thinking about taking action with data, doing technical work with data and hard skills. Let's start by thinking about how we can help people improve their confidence, their understanding of value in data. And this is the data and AI literacy problem that we see in all large organizations. So fundamentally, in your organization as it stands today, there will be two types of people. However much some organizations like to claim that everyone in our organization is a data person, data's everyone's problem, in reality, there are still two types of people. On the right-hand side, you've got people who are very, very good at their day jobs. They're good senior leaders, they're good salespeople, finance people, whatever their day job is. However, What they are not necessarily is data first minded, confident in data. A lot of the skills probably aren't there. Do they understand how to use it to make decisions? Unlikely on a wider scale. On the left-hand side, as you look at it, you've got data professionals, I'm assuming some of whom are in the room today. From that side of things, you've got people who are much better at the data, much better at the skills, the tooling, the how do I do the data stuff. But what we see is that they're not always as good at the business acumen, the commercial acumen, the soft skills. And as a result, you end up with a two-sided knowledge gap where the sides don't understand each other, and a two-sided communication gap where they don't know how to talk to each other. And the best data cultures we see, and when we've been in and done programs of work and these gaps start to shrink, the better the smaller these gaps are, the better the data culture will be. Everyone is chasing data culture at the moment. It's a big strategic piece in a lot of strategies. The smaller these gaps, the better the data culture. So what you want to be doing through your data literacy and data and AI literacy program is teaching the business people data, but also teaching the data people business and soft skills to close these two gaps. And the thing that you've got to think about, and one of the biggest challenges you'll face, so we always say we're an education company first. We're not a data company, in inverted commas. We're an education company first. My degree is in education. Katy spends her whole life talking and thinking about education, more so than data. There's a concept in education called taught fear or learned fear. And it's the concept that as human beings, we've taught ourselves there are subjects we can't learn. So mine that I always go to is languages. I had some bad experiences in school with languages. I've taught myself I'll never be able to learn a second language. So when I go to learn about languages or talk about languages, I get a knot in my stomach, I get a fight or flight moment, and I never go back to it. Unfortunately, for a lot of people in data, people on the business side, maths, stats, probability, new technologies, new ways of working, they're all taught fears or learned fears that people want to run away from. So what we've got to do is find a way to really engage those people. So what you'll hear today is that the best way to solve this problem, get the people on the journey and help them execute through data and AI, is to think change management, comms and engagement first, and then education. If you rush straight to the training, you'll find there's a real disengagement from a lot of the audience. But what does that actually look like? Well, Google, oh, hello. Didn't realize that was going to happen, but that's quite a cool feature. Hi, Rob. We'll answer that question a little bit later. We will take questions at the end, and we'll pick that one up. So, in terms of, does it disappear? We're learning this link.
I love you, Rob.
So, what we see is that there's ultimately, because data professionals and data teams are data fluent themselves or borderline data fluent, is what they see as a data literacy program or an AI literacy program typically is the right hand side of this curve, right at the top towards tooling, hard skills, technology, self-service. But actually, the core problem you've got, and Google have done a big body of research on this, found that 80% of people in a large organization sit at the bottom of this curve. Right now, they don't have confidence in data. They don't understand how it's going to make their life better. We always say a lot of the time, a lot of people would love their job to be easier. They'd love their results to be better, but they just can't connect how data helps them achieve those two things. So they're not there. They're not ready for technology. They're not ready to dive straight into Power BI or Tableau. What they need is to be shaped around how to confidently talk about it, how to be a better partner to the data team. And that's all at the bottom of the curve. So when you're thinking about your data and AI literacy problem and program, don't only think hard skills and technology, think how you're going to bring everybody on that journey at the bottom there. Equally, the elephant in the 2024 data room is AI. And we've done a lot of thinking about not jumping into the AI messaging and AI space too early. We wanted to see how it played out within our clients, within their people. And what's been super interesting is that because generative AI is so accessible, we all know that ChatGPT in particular has exploded in terms of availability and access. Copilot is very present in some businesses, and people are getting used to it being part of their meetings, part of their world. Actually, there's a strong argument that says Gen AI value, Gen AI engagement, the feedback loop into AI products can come earlier for a business person than rolling them out and expecting them to be self-service in some of your core tools. So what we say there is absolutely there's a data fluent element of AI at the top, which is the creation, the large language, machine learning, etc. That is going to be for the people in the data science team to really get their hands on and get into. But if we can get the piece of literacy and the piece of engagement right early, there's massive opportunity at the middle of this curve to get people delivering business value from Gen AI and feeding into those products even earlier than before they become somebody who can technically deliver themselves on Power BI or Tableau.
This is where your question comes in, Rob. I'm going to answer that as we go through this as well. Because as Greg's just described, what we're talking about is the confidence and the ability to get on board with a program like this before we even get close to those hard skills. And one of the biggest key takeaways, I think, from this session is that where a lot of people take a leap into it and start to develop a program, they make a key mistake of thinking that everybody who sits in a particular role or a particular seniority level are actually the same. And it's not the case. So here we've got Tom. He's a persona, and you'll probably have come across persona development before. But I'd hazard a guess that you've probably done what I've just said and leapt into it with, okay, we've got a load of people in a particular role, and therefore we'll develop a persona around those people. Our findings from that is that they just don't work. You could have 10 people in the same job, in the same role, have been there exactly the same length of time, or at the same seniority level, and they'd all approach the world of data differently. So going back to Rob's point about how many people do we hear that are not, that say, I don't do data. Well, actually, that happens at every different level in every different role. So going back to those 10 people, you'd have 2 people that go, I'm super excited. I love Excel. I like doing things with data. I like looking for insights. You'd equally have 2 people that go, absolutely not. That is not for me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any of the words that you're using. And then you'll have a whole host of people that sit in the middle that are like, maybe, maybe not. And treating them all in the same way just doesn't work. So what we like to talk about in our programs, and as we're starting to prepare people for that journey that they're on, is the different ways that those learning paths need to be created or curated around those personas or these people that are actually under a behavioral system instead of a job one, and how you would communicate differently to those people. So what type of effort might you need to give them that confidence to even be part of a conversation? So those people that literally say, I'm not a data person, I don't even know the words you're using, but actually they're working with information management and inputting all the time. They need something very different to somebody who's been working with Excel for years, or have been working in a data function or a data office or a really confident data environment. And it all comes back down to how do they behave? How do they engage with the information around them? How do they engage with people in the data team as well? What kinds of knowledge or experience do they have? Do they come from a place where they're digitally native to begin with or not? And then the types of experiences that they're used to. So if they have in their role and a way of working with BI, great. But that doesn't mean that everybody in that same role would engage that BI tool or that MI tool in the same way or have confidence to do so. And their outcomes are very different. So what are they wanting to achieve might not be that top of that curve that Greg mentioned. It might be one step up. It might just be really familiar with the terms that are used, or it might be, I just want more confidence to be able to better articulate my request to the data team, or to be able to have that conversation that I don't get that gut feeling or that nervousness when I go into a meeting and somebody's going to ask me a question about an insight or some data or a trend that's taking place. So how do we identify those people? What we do is we start with a learning needs analysis, and that's a term that's bandied around everywhere. You'll have come across learning needs analysis before, but there's a real different takeaway from what you'll get from working with partner like us, and that's on a subjective assessment. So if you were to ask me, as a data professional, as a career data professional, how good I was at a particular tool or subject, I would have an idea. I'd probably underestimate how good I was, or in some areas I probably overestimate it. So it's really important not just to take a subjective viewpoint on a learning needs analysis and ask somebody to self-rate, because we're really bad at it. You know, we're either really nervous about that and the imposter syndrome comes in, or people will start to think that they're actually much better because their world exists around Excel and they're really good at it and they're the expert in their team, but actually don't know that other tooling or technologies or capabilities such as analytics exist. So I've taken bullet point 2 specifically there to start with, just to explain that difference between what is subjective and introducing an objective assessment where we can do sort of a mini test of some sort and get people to do an activity that enables them to be categorized into it. And wrapping around that is this term or this model of Dunning-Kruger effect. And that is purely the point that we are really bad at self-assessments, you know, so subjective assessment doesn't work. It's that ability to say, actually, the more I know, or the more I think I know, is not accurate at all. Do a better job at that for me, Greg. Tell me what that is.
What Katy's trying to say is that Dunning-Kruger effect is that the less we know about a subject, the more we think we know about that subject. So you'll all have met people in your day jobs who can do some Excel and therefore they must be a data expert in their own mind. Those people very often appear in finance. I think we all joke about that regularly. What they don't know is the big world of data and how to do it better. So really, if you ask somebody what they know about data, they've just not got line of sight on what is out there and what they should know. So Dunning-Kruger means that really we have to find a way of objectively assessing their performance and their capability. Otherwise, they'll end up on the wrong learning path, the wrong level of engagement, because they think they are better than they are or worse than they are, basically.
And this happens so practically. So I can remember the first time that I attempted to do a learning needs analysis in an organization where I was head of data analytics. And I did that subjective methodology. You know, I was like asking people how they thought they did. And then I'd speak to the people around them and their managers, and they'd say, oh, they're much better at that than they've given themselves credit for. Or you'd have somebody else going, oh, I'm really expert and I can teach other people on this. And their colleagues are going, I wouldn't ask them to do that. There's limitations in their knowledge. And that's just, when you do that, it's not scalable either. When you're doing that self-assessment piece, getting people on that real accurate learning path and how they're going to take their careers or their pathways to the next level is a challenge, because people just disengage. So that was the outcome that I'd found, was if people aren't on the right suitable learning for them and you're guiding them in a way that they think is appropriate, as soon as they find it hard, it's that real need for it being accurate to get the best out of people as well.
The other thing as well, I've just come off a conversation where this was quite relevant, is that if you decide to throw a subjective assessment out to the whole business, fill in this survey, tell us where you think you are in data, tell us what you think you need to learn, you'll very quickly find that the people that respond to that are the people who are, in essence, the best you've got available within the business, because they've already got appetite, they've already got enthusiasm, they see data and they go, oh, I'd love to respond to that. I wonder if it'll result in me getting on a learning path. The problem you've got by doing that is you close your eyes and you close your ears to the silent majority who are out there, and your bigger problem really are the ones who aren't responding. They're the ones you properly need to worry about. They're still putting data into systems. They should still be making data-driven decisions. They can't even be bothered to reply to your survey. So not only is the survey flawed because it's asking them some stuff they can't really genuinely answer from an educational perspective, but it's also giving you a highly biased view of the organization. And I think that's also a challenge with maturity assessments as well. Very often the maturity assessments we see are really victim to Dunning-Kruger too, because they've only heard back from the people who wanted to talk about the subject. So those are a couple of gotchas if you are doing that type of big piece. And as I said, we'd recommend doing an objective assessment, not a subjective assessment.
And we don't go into it blindly. Just before you move on to there as well, is that, you know, we've spent such a long time doing both. I think we don't want to shy away from the aspect of what people believe is their strengths and their abilities. And what we find is that it's regularly inaccurate. So we've got a big body of research that we collect where we ask people to do that element of subjectiveness to see how accurate and how comparative it is to the other. And we know from experience that it is pretty inaccurate.
Yeah. So of the every learner we've ever analysed who thought they were our more advanced business side persona, only 29% of people actually objectively tested as that. Which means that of all those people who thought they'd tell you they need to be on a more advanced learning path, they need to be creating stuff in Tableau or Power BI or doing SQL or whatever it is, 71% of them would have been on the wrong learning path, which means you'd have had a failed program, basically. So it can be significantly detrimental. So then you've got the concept of how do we build a program which engages the audience, especially those really challenging Tom personas that Katy shared earlier. People who don't see this as part of their world right now, that is a tough audience to engage. Equally, I think we're all aware, those people out there who think they're better than they are already, they're also tough because convincing them that they've got stuff to learn is a challenge. Why would they learn? They're already happy with their 24 connecting spreadsheets. That's the way their world works. So what you've got to do is build a program of change. And it's change management first, education second, like we've already said. We use two models of change. The first is Lewin's model of change, which is a simple concept, really, that there's a status quo within your large organization right now. That status quo is probably that data isn't as valued as it should be, isn't as well used as it should be. We've got to unfreeze that status quo. We've got to create the change, which is where the education comes in and changing those behaviors and mindsets, knowledge, skills, etc. And then we've got to refreeze that because everyone forgets that we've got to lock these behaviors in. There's no point doing sheep dip education that nobody remembers has happened and therefore nothing changes. In fact, that's a really good way to waste a load of money. What we need to do is lock that in and refreeze that. We also use the ADKAR model, which is much better at targeting the individual mindset, the individual heart and mind, and we combine those two to build the building blocks. So what you're doing in the planning and preparation phase, you need to understand your organization, or if you're working with a partner like us, we need to understand your organization. This has to be tied to business value. It has to be tied to things that people outside of data care about. If you've never looked at your business strategy, if you've never spoken to your business stakeholders about what really drives them on and makes them want to be involved with the work they do, you're missing a massive trick because that's where the ROI is, it's where the success is. And one of the challenges we see very often is data teams struggle to have those conversations because, as I said earlier, they're not necessarily commercial themselves, and therefore you find yourself at loggerheads about what you're talking about. So what we want to do in that phase is understand your corporate strategy, your data strategy, any key strategies, programs or initiatives that are going on around the business, because we need to be able to message this change program around the value to the people that are going to be in the audience. It isn't about data quality. I hate to say it, data governance, data quality, the things that matter to people in rooms like this just aren't that interesting to people outside of these rooms. This is all about how we drive measurement, enablement, and outcomes for the business. It's not necessarily always about solving our own headaches ultimately. You want to do an awareness campaign. You want to be thinking about this as a strong internal marketing campaign. If you think about data literacy and a data literacy and culture program as isolated to your own world, again, missing a massive trick. Be working with the L&D team, be working with the internal comms team, be working with the project managers, because these are big projects to run when they get going. And getting that enterprise awareness campaign out there, communicating the value of the program, communicating the opportunity of the program, getting senior leaders involved to be the voice for the program. That all takes time, but it has to be put out there as part of that campaign. Katy's already done a really good job of going through the baseline assessment process. Keep it objective, not just subjective. If you can't find a way of doing an objective assessment, well, we can. Then you deploy the education, and that's, again, a key theme. We lean heavily into live online learning for scalability. Live in-person learning is also a really good tool. If you're thinking about solving this problem by throwing self-service learning, LinkedIn learning, whatever it might be, sorry to LinkedIn, given that they're hosting this platform, but I apologize. Whatever that might look like, it probably isn't going to land with most of your audience. Like, this has to be a highly engaged, opportunity for people to fight through their fight and flight moments. And therefore, we don't see self-service only programs work that well at all. The disengagement, the lack of success for the learner is significant compared to a live experience. And then we've got to lock it in with those things like simple stuff like gamification and learner success paths, but also communities of practice. Your community of practice should grow because your literacy and culture program is successful. If you've not got a community of practice outside of the data team, you're massively missing an opportunity to create a feedback loop, constantly be updating people's training and education. So think about how that changes the behaviors of the organization by engaging with data on a more regular basis. Obviously, we can go into much more detail in a separate session, but the concept of change management first is absolutely vital. And why is it vital? It's because you have a need as a data team for people to use data. The expectation is that the work you're doing drives value, but it only drives value if people are using it. And we've distilled it down to this, which is really hopefully simple to understand. People don't use things they don't trust, and they don't trust things they don't understand. So you can give them the best data set in the world, you can give them the best, sexiest piece of technology in the world, but actually they're not going to use any of it if they don't trust it, and they're not going to trust it if they don't understand it. The way they're going to understand it is if you care enough about them and take them on the journey with you and bring them along on the literacy journey. Literacy drives understanding, understanding drives trust, trust drives usage. And we'll talk about some figures related to that towards the end of the session.
So we don't do this by accident, I think, is the key takeaway here. Greg said earlier about it being about education, it being about the real process that sits around the data literacy curve and the AI literacy curve. Isn't just the we do data and we're going to do this better. It's much about how do you take on the skills and professional expertise from all of the different industries that can contribute to this. And we've created our framework that enables us to work through the blended learning strategies of which there's hundreds, to make a really good core program of why we think this works and why a data literacy program like the ones that we deliver are actually adding value that isn't just a side of desk. You know, I've been in that other role. I've been in those heads of data and director data roles where you're trying to do this in-house. And the challenge is having time and having the ability to do all of these pieces that are thinking about learning and education standards, thinking about how you're going to run and deliver those things, how are you going to get everybody excited and enthused through that internal comms process. And it's really, really hard. So one of the things we want to leave you with today is the framework that we use, that we created, that helps you think about those different blended learning approaches that you might want to adopt. So for us, it starts with laying the foundations. And we talked there about the learning needs analysis, and just harp on again about it being objective and not just subjective. Thinking about how you might scaffold it. So as adult learners, we already have a back catalogue of all of the learning, all of the distractions in our lives, all of the time, poor commitments that we already have to fit in more learning and development, means that we're not starting from a baseline place that children start from. So learning as an adult is very different, and scaffolding existing learning and building up in blocks is really important. We also learn from each other. We spend, especially in this remote working environment that lots of us find ourselves in, that's really hard. So we use a lot around social learning theory and modeling behaviors. That means that learning isn't separate. So data literacy isn't separate to workplaces and engagement with the work that people are doing day in and day out, because then it's easier to learn how you fit data into that. How does that become applicable? How do you become self-recognizing as, oh, I am a data person, when you're working with patient records or you're working with sales figures, etc. And then it's all about transformational learning under this laying foundations section. And there is elements of self-directed learning to help bolster and enhance learning practice. But that's all about just getting started. Next, we start to think about experimentation and the theory of experimental learning and building, testing, practicing. When something doesn't work, that's okay. We've learned something along the way. We might do a whole load of work, especially in analytical roles, that come to nothing. But the fact that you've got to that position is really, really important. And experimental learning allows people to test and learn in safe environments and spaces. We tend to do that by setting problem statements and moving into some of the active learning environments. So having problems that people come together to try and solve, and then building up that development or introducing some of the theoretical approaches or skill set or some of those harder skills along the way. And that we refer to that as part of the constructivism approach as well to active learning. And flipping classrooms is something that we do. We break out rooms, we get people to work through problems, not just sit and lecture at them. Reflection is really, really important. And my background from psychology is actually this is where some of that learning happens. It's great having it in classrooms, but actually what do people take away, and the activities and the thought process. And there's many different industries that really do this well. So knowledge management talk a lot about this. We've got lots of things in learning theory that you can search out yourself, but reflection is really, really important. And then the final one is all about nurturing collaboration. We don't learn as humans on our own very well. We spend a lot of time, and the most impactful learning comes often from storytelling. So you'll remember that example or that use case somebody gave you that sticks in your mind. Is like, oh, we did this and we did this differently and this looked different. And a lot of our learning programs really enhance that opportunity to do that. And this is one of the key takeaways that I think probably people miss, is that ability to nurture that collaboration and those case studies. And it goes full circle back to that social learning theory I mentioned at the beginning, is we learn from each other, and that peer collaboration. And Greg mentioned it before about having those communities and the necessity to have communities working together with different experiences, and bringing that sort of underpinned all by synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. So having that time where people are working through things live together, having that time for reflective practice that people can come back to and remodel and build on, and reflect on how they've taken that learning and have put it into practice. But that doesn't stand alone. So none of that just happens in isolation, because do you know what? We've all been on learning programs where you turn up to the day and you sit there and you get told a load of stuff and you walk away and you never really put it into practice, and you go, I once did that learning. I think I must have learned SQL about 10 times in the first times that I started learning, because I just didn't put it into practice. I wasn't hearing how others were using it. And that's just has to be reinforced through that change management process that Greg said, that unfreezing practices and behaviors and bad practices that you've developed over time, being open to that testing and learning and experimental, and then refreezing that as the new ways of working and really putting it into practice.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a flavour of the fact that this is an education problem. Whether you're planning to go alone on this, whether you're planning to use a partner, we can never guarantee what knowledge and skill set your learning and development internally team have, but you'd hope they'd cover some of that with you. I think it's a really hard thing for the data team to do, because there's so much educational knowledge and theory required, and it is a side of desk problem for most data teams. So just work out how you're going to deliver that level of effectiveness in your education, because that is what will make it stick. So the bad news I've got for you is that it's a pretty tough thing to do to run a program well. We're super fortunate. Coventry Building Society, I don't know if anyone's on the call today. We're partnered with them. They've just won the Data IQ Award for Best Data Academy. And it was recognised in their write-up that it was because they had all these elements in place. They thought about the change management element as important. They thought about the live education, the asynchronous education, the community work, the stuff for their data professionals. It's all part of it. And you can tell from the fact that there's that much in it, it is not a tick box exercise. The other things that we see being done as mistakes, and why people don't see themselves as getting value from the budget they put in, because they focus it all on the data team. How can we make our data team even more expert? Definitely get it. It's a super important thing to do. But that just spreads that gap wider, that two-sided knowledge gap, that two-sided communication gap. It gives the haves more and the have-nots less. And that's what we want to avoid. It's also not just about your execs. You don't need every exec in the organization to be data literate and backing you for data to thrive. So you have to take it beyond the exec team. Lean into the ones who are keen and want to work with you, but also work with their teams, because their teams are going to be the people that are making decisions in the business every day. Hopefully we've given you a flavour of the fact this isn't an easy thing to do. You can't just switch it on tomorrow. It takes time. And the point we want to emphasize is that to do this well, it isn't a cheap thing to do. The challenge I always give back to data professionals is when you look at your strategy, it probably comes down to three things: technology, process, and people. When it comes down to your budget over the last 3 to 5 years, what is the distribution of that? Because I can bet my bottom dollar it isn't third. You will have spent so much money on technology, bums on seats, getting engineers in, building your pipelines, and you'll have invested far less in the people to come on the journey with you. If you're looking in the mirror and thinking that's a thing that you've done, it may also be why your data products aren't being adopted. It may be why the business isn't seeing the value you're delivering. So it isn't cheap, but put some budget aside for it because it's well worth doing. But what is the business case for it? Well, if it was just to give people skills, it wouldn't be worth doing. Okay. Firstly, you don't just need competent people, because competent people go off and do their own thing. You need them to be conscious as well as competent. Are they doing it in the way that you need them to? Single source of truth, governance, all that kind of stuff. But really, if you're going to go and ask for what should be a 6-figure budget to do this properly over the next few years, you're going to need to attach it to things that people actually care about. And that's things like data culture. You can't have a data culture without having a data literate workforce. The word cult in culture is people all thinking the same, talking the same, believing the same, trusting the same stuff. If people don't understand it, they can't possibly be a part of that culture, and therefore you need to bring them on that journey. A really good way of building a business case for this is to attach it to a program of work that's already going on. Have you got an ERP transformation, a BI tool transformation, whatever it might be? Well, build the first program into that budget, because there's loads of budget available for those programs at the moment. They're the biggest budget in businesses as it stands. If you can get yourself as a budget line on that, you'll find it much easier to build the business case, the success criteria around adoption of that new tool, adoption of the new process, whatever it might be. That's going to be valuable to you.
It's where we see, isn't it, Greg, where we see that actually the biggest challenge is that there's already a transformation happened and then nobody's adopted it. So
yeah, 100%. So much money is wasted on transformations that are not adopted, that people have got to start building this in as a budget line. We've got some really interesting use cases where, talking to AI and where this conversation started, people had built unbelievable recommendations engines for their sales team. And because they didn't prep the sales team for it, the sales team thought it was going to steal their jobs. So it never delivered the ROI that was promised. That's your worst nightmare as a data team and a data leader. And then the other thing that we really believe in is that the adoption of data governance and data governance frameworks, effective data stewarding, effective data ownership, is driven by literacy. If you don't have people who understand the value of data, they are not going to care about stewarding it. The example I always give is a sporting one. I've not come up with a better example yet, but I love sport. I love football. Katy loves it a lot less, right? If you ask Katy to referee a game of football, she won't know when to blow a whistle. She will get through the game as quick as possible because she doesn't care about the goal. She doesn't care about the celebration. She doesn't care about the league points. Ask me to do it. I'll do my level best because I care about all those things. I care enough about the value of the game to actually referee it and effectively steward it. What we ask people to do is steward data and own data when they don't understand the value of it and they don't care enough about it. So you'll never get them to actually apply good stewardship and ownership. So if you're rolling that out, I think it's the hardest job in data at the moment to get an effective governance program running. But the people need to care first. They need to be data literate first before they're going to be willing to steward effectively. And then the only other point I'll make on this, because I obviously can't see who's in the room, we haven't had a program signed off, a good full-scale program signed off that didn't involve the CDO, the CIO, or a C-suite member as the champion. If you're in a non-budget holding role, it's really unlikely that you will get this done alone. You have to empower yourself by bringing the C-suite in early as possible. Have those conversations. Don't be scared to have them. if you're working with a partner, whether it's us or somebody else, let them speak to them, because that's what gets a really effective literacy program running. And I think that is a really key message. If you want to build a business case, it's people with C-suite titles who typically get money signed off, and you're naive if you don't bring them in as early as possible.
I think just the tie-in for that for me is, if you're in an organization that is driven by the commercial side, that lends itself really well. But equally as well, if you're driven by an organization that's really risk averse, I think having that tie into sort of the data governance, or what could go wrong, or what has gone wrong in lots of organizations, can be tied back to the confidence, the attitudes, the capabilities of people who are doing the majority of the work in a business.
Agree. And then finally, why would you do this? Well, it's because it actually does have impact. So I said it's not about the data team, it's about the strategic priorities and all that type of stuff. It absolutely is, and that's what you're looking to deliver. You're looking to, like it says at the bottom, like 97% more people are 97% of people are understanding how data can help them solve business problems now. 96% are already building it into their work. But at the same time, 90% are more likely to log into their BI tool. 92% understand their impact on data quality now. So by doing this right, getting the right senior leaders involved, getting the right strategic approach to this, and then getting the right delivery of engagement, change, education, you can have an impact on your own wins and the business wins all in one go. And therefore, again, if you have looked at your budget over the last 3 to 5 years and it's 10x on technology versus what you've spent on people in the wider business, have a review of what you're doing in 25, 26, because I think it'll help you an awful lot to get people on the journey.
And just before we go into the Q&A, I think the full circle picture there is where to start. So we had the McKinsey sort of example up right at the beginning that said there's such opportunity in each of these other areas, these business functions, these like HR, supply chain, finance, that really just haven't quite got started on this data and AI literacy journey yet. And I think that's when you're starting to tie in about where do you even get started. I think it's finding that true value in the business that can really, really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can put questions in the chat, and if there's no questions, we'll obviously go separate ways, but you can definitely put questions in the chat if anyone's got them. We'll give you like 30 seconds and then we'll wrap up.
That's mean. I can't type that quick.
All right, we'll give them a minute. All good. Although I would have thought they'd have come in as they've been going on, I guess, is the thing. So
I reckon Rob's got some more.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, hopefully we've covered enough that people feel like they've got something that they can take away, and at least a new mindset to how they're thinking about the program. So from our side, as I said, we work with large businesses to do this every day, and we believe and we see in the figures that the results are really significant compared to when people try to do it themselves. So if you want to talk about that, you can always give us a shout either on the website at dl-academy.com or hello@dl-academy.com if you want to come direct for a chat. Otherwise, we will leave you to your Friday, and we will speak to you on next month's web. Oh, thanks, Jonathan. We will speak to you on next month's webinar, because these are going to become a regular occurrence. Thank you all.